This podcast episode is brought to you by Coors Light. These days, everything is go, go, go. It's nonstop hustle all the time. Work, friends, family expect you to be on 24/7. Well, sometimes you just need to reach for a Coors Light because it's made to chill. Coors Light is cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged. It's as crisp and refreshing as the Colorado Rockies. It is literally made to chill. Coors Light is the one I choose when I need to unwind. So when you want to hit reset, reach for the beer that's made to chill. Get Coors Light in the new look delivered straight to your door with Drizzly or Instacart. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado.
Hello, everybody. Elon here, and I guess you'll notice from the lack of Keeping Karlsson music and my not screaming like a maniac, this is not a regular episode of Keeping Karlsson. It's actually a day off for my friend Brian because it's his birthday. So a very happy birthday to the maestro of the matchup, the player projection pundit, the Corsi authority, the ad drop ace, the IPP MVP, the forecasting fanatic, the rotisserie robot, the poobah of prognostication, the connoisseur of conjecture, the prima donna of prophecy, Brian Com. Happy birthday to you. But still, we thought, let's give the listeners something. We actually do have a really fun show planned for tomorrow, which I'll get to in just a second. We thought it's Sunday night. We got to release something for Keeping Karlsson. And this is what we came up with because last week I participated in a bonus episode of the Cupful Stat Attack podcast, which is a podcast all about the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League. And we had a reunion show for all of the participants from Tier 1 who were able to make it. And it was a really fun show. We mentioned it last week. We talked a lot of strategy. We congratulated Dustin Au for his big win. And I think people are going to like that show. So we're going to be dropping that show for you today, right now, in this very episode. And then tomorrow, Brian and I will come back at you with a really fun new episode of Keeping Karlsson. So I'll tell you about that in just a sec. First, a couple news and notes about the show that you're about to listen to now. First of all, it's hosted by John Newhold from jnsoftware.ca. John, as you'll hear, is going to be joining Tier 1 next year. He's a really brilliant fantasy player, and he's been hosting the Stat Attack podcast all year. So thanks so much to John for hosting the reunion show. There's a bit of a sound quality issue. Specifically, I was using the wrong microphone for the very start. You'll notice in the middle of me talking at one point early on in the show, I switched to the better sound quality, so just watch out for that. Aside from that, it was a really fun show with some voices you'll definitely recognize if you've been listening to shows from the Keeping Karlsson network, so I hope you like it. Before we get to it, let me mention a couple things. First of all, Keeping Karlsson is presented by Dauber Hockey, the #1 fantasy hockey website in the whole world. They're going to be keeping you up to date with everything you need to know going into your playoff pools, so definitely if you plan to continue playing fantasy hockey, or even if not, in terms of playoff pools, they're already going to start looking into stuff for next year all throughout the summer. So dauberhockey.com, you definitely want to be keeping appraised of all of the articles over there. We'll mention that for Keeping Karlsson, we still have our Patreon program running through the summer with our awesome Discord community. If you want to join right now, just $1 a month US, and you get access to all the perks we have to offer. So if that interests you at all, check out keepingkarlsson.com/patron. And then I'll say that the show tomorrow that you are hopefully somewhat anticipating is going to be a really fun show. Brian and I have been soliciting excuses from everyone who's lost their fantasy leagues. So first of all, congratulations to everyone who's won their leagues. Congratulations, look at you. But there's a lot of us who weren't able to pull it off, at least in all of our leagues. And we thought it would be fun to do a show where it's going to be myself, Brian, and Ben Burnett from Short Shifts, and we're going to be just going through some of the various excuses and trying to come up with a winner. Like, who has the best excuse? Who really should have won but just lost because of bad luck? Or, like, we'll go through all the different possible reasons you may have lost and arbitrarily rate them as we are wont to do. So that's going to be a really fun show. So definitely stay tuned for that. If you want to share your reason for losing, your excuse, tweet at us at Keeping Karlsson, and maybe we'll be able to get that in time. But okay, enough jibber jabber. I really hope you enjoy this episode of the Cupful Stat Attack, the Cupful Tier 1 reunion show. Enjoy.
That's a hockey, it's only a game.
Young men expressing themselves for joy.
Why do you have to be mad?
These guys, to me, are jerks.
It's only a game.
It's a cheap, dirty game.
It's only a game.
Why do you have to be mad?
Greetings, Cupful fans. It's the final day of Unique Season, and of the over 300 participants, 14 had climbed their way into Tier 1 for this year. And of those 14, one has just been crowned the ultimate fantasy hockey champion. Dustin, how does it feel to have successfully climbed this mountain?
Well, you never know, John. There could still be a 5-goal game at a Fabry. I'm only up by about 20 points, so it might be too soon to call it, but I'm feeling pretty good about it, I got to say.
So we're happy to have everyone here for the reunion show for the final episode of the Stat Attack podcast this season, where we talk about the Cupful and everything going on. Dustin was up against Ben in the finals this week. And so, Dustin, how did you feel this week? Can you walk us through your emotional state throughout the different stages of this week?
It was a long week. I was an emotional wreck for most of it. And it was a really volatile week. I had a great Monday, and then Ben had an amazing Tuesday. And it felt like every other day it was going back and forth, back and forth. I managed to hold a lead for most of the week, but it was really close for the majority of it. So yesterday was just the pinnacle of everything, right? I think at one point the projection started to flip and I was feeling real nervous. I was up all the way to the end of the games here in London. So about 5 a.m, just watching those points trickle in. But it feels real good now.
For real? Like you couldn't go to sleep because you were watching the game?
No, I passed the time playing Chell with the boys, but couldn't go to bed knowing that I had my season on the line.
Do you stress out a lot during the year over things, or what
things in general?
Standard,
yeah,
like with your fantasy leagues.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit obsessive. I think it's probably a good attribute to have with this kind of thing. But I mean, I think in general, I probably try to overanalyze things, not try to, but end up doing that, and usually serves me a little better if I can.
So you've joined a unique group here. There's only a few people that have ever been the ultimate champion of the Cupful, Dustin. So can you maybe chart us your path a little bit through the Cupful? How'd you join up? How long have you been here? How'd you rise through the ranks?
Oh, wow. Well, it's been a really good string of luck. I was reminiscing a while back on my path. I think I've been in the Cupful for 5 years. First year, I joined Tier 6 back when it was a ladder, not a pyramid, so it was a bit easier to climb. But I won that year, Tier 6, even though I spent the entire season without a roster filled. I think I realized in end of March that I was missing a roster spot for about 4 months, but I still managed to take it home. I jumped up all the way to Tier 2. Played in a tier with Elon, and I lost to him in the semifinals. So I ended up placing 3rd. But lucky me, Elon decided to be a good man and give up his Tier 1 spot because he didn't want to be in the same tier as Brian. So I think I won a coin flip between the other 3rd place finisher and the other Tier 2 league. And so it was a little bit of luck that I even got into Tier 1. I've been in Tier 1 3 years now, and it's been okay. I've had kind of mediocre, middle of the pack runs. I think I finished 5th 1 year and 7th 1 year. But even last year, I finished 7th, and I was in the consolation. And it was only by luck that the season ended that I ended up getting that 7th place to avoid relegation. So had Elon and Brian decided to determine relegation a different way, I might not even be in Tier 1 this year. So a lot of luck along the way. And then this year, it seemed like every week things were going my way. So somebody's, smiling on me up there.
Well, I think your season started off with David Pastrnak coming off the IR earlier than most people would have expected. So when you went into the draft, was that something you were thinking of? This is someone I want to target?
I thought he was going to go below value. Ultimately, I thought, it's going to be such a competitive league. You really got to take a risk, and a good way to get great value based on an auction draft is to try to target some of those guys where you're going to have a bit of risk. I was targeting Pasta for sure. I got him for $45, which is probably $10 below his value. There was a lot of worry on guys like Gabriel Landeskog, who was playing on the second line at the time, and I got him for, I think, 26, which was pretty good value for someone who finished in the top 25. I think I nailed quite a few picks, and there's a little bit of risk involved with that. I'd like to say I did the same with Evander Kane, although I think the news with his bankruptcy and his personal financial problems came out a bit after the draft. But there was a lot of that going in, and I figured, throw these risks down And if they pan out, then I'm in really good shape. If not, then and I come 14th in tier one, I'll just chalk it up to steep competition. And that'll be my excuse.
Well, and for your $20 investment in Evander Kane, he provided the most cupful points for you all season. He 274 and 3/4 cupful points as of before yesterday when I downloaded all this information here. So that was a huge return on that investment. Like you said, Landeskog at 26, Bergeron at 29, Stone at 32, Hedman at 36. All of these guys provide you a nice solid, 5+ cupful points per game. And when it came to goalies, it seemed like you really benefited from Varlamov playing both better and probably more than I think most people might have expected.
Yeah, I had no idea. I mean, I was high on Varlamov for a long time. I didn't understand really why there wasn't any more demand for, a veteran goalie on possibly the best defensive team in the league. I think I got him for $3. And even if he split, I think his rate stats were good enough that he was providing good value when he was playing. And I think he might have edged out Sorokin for games played over the course of the season, possibly. So, yeah, I was pretty happy with him. But I mean, even in week 14, I had to drop him for Leonard, who I thought at the time was going to get a few more games played, and nobody picked him up. So I picked him right back up for week 15, and he got me a couple of shutouts. So no love for Varlamov among tier one participants for some reason. I don't understand it.
I wonder, people are concerned, how many games does he play? But at some point, if you're getting shutouts every other game, it doesn't matter how many games you play. You're getting 12, 14 points a night or whatever. And you got him for $3. Now, that said, on the goalie side of things, you also picked up Carter Hart for 16.
I did, yeah. Probably the only blemish looking back on my auction day. I was really worried about the Hedman pick with 36. I think that was the fourth most expensive defenseman off the board, but that seemed to have worked out based on his performance. Carter Hart was a miss, but I still like Hart. I think the team has something to give. And if the pattern of making the playoffs one year and not making the playoffs the next year has anything like it continues, then maybe that's someone I'm targeting next year.
And so I wonder, sorry, go ahead, Elon.
I was gonna say, I feel like it's almost like if you were able to get one goalie that worked out really well for you and one goalie that didn't, it's almost like you're fine, because a lot of us were dropping goalies left and right, and you were able to ride Varley to a lot of points throughout the season. So even if Carter Hart didn't work out for you, not too bad.
I held on to Hart for a lot longer than I should have. I think he stayed on my roster till week 11 to week 10, week 11. He had a long leash for me for some reason, but I like him. I think he's got some more to give.
I think Elon's point is valid in a league of this size, so this depth of available players and the way the cupful points kind of work. And again, goalies have been kind of reduced in value over the years. Like, everyone's kind of view of them has gone down, that hitting one big goalie as opposed to two mediocre goalies is probably more valuable for you and brought you a lot more benefit than if you'd had like someone better than Hart, but someone not as good as Varlamov.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point. That tends to work out if you don't hold on to Carter Hart for that entire time. If I just cut bait with him in week 2 or, maybe week 4, week 5, when he really started to fall apart and picked up just a replacement level skater, yeah, that would have been fantastic. And maybe I would have finished a bit higher in the league long point output.
It also seems like you didn't get bidlocked by the injury bug. So yeah, none of your big players seem to spend any extended periods of time out of the lineup. That was probably helpful as well.
Yeah, more of the luck coming in. Had a few weeks with some issues with postponed games due to COVID, but no real significant injuries. A couple of games here and there. I think Bergeron lost a key game in the playoffs, but I'm talking about individual games here. So honestly, I think the luck with the injuries was really good this year.
And then looking at your like low dollar swings, you had for $2 Duchesne, Eric Stahl, Guryanov, $1 Coleman, Murphy, Stasny. Any of those guys stand out to you as guys that meant anything to you over the season? You eventually just dropped them all?
No, when I look at an auction draft, I realize over the course of the season, I'm going to manage my team enough that I'm going to want the roster flexibility anyway. So I see those guys as all replacement. The bottom 7 guys on my roster are not guys I'm going to keep. I think I got pretty good return out of Guryanov in week 1 and 2, so I was able to flip him in a deal for Pulak. But other than that, I don't think any of those guys really stayed on my roster for any meaningful time.
So is there a point in this season where you said to yourself, hey, I might actually have a better chance than not of winning this whole thing?
Maybe around like week 6 when I was 6-0, I was feeling pretty good. And then Tom Crovers had something to do with it or something to say about that. But, once I went through half the season and I hadn't had a loss yet, I was like, things are going pretty well. I've got some tough matchups coming up for sure. But if I can, split those, if I can split the next 4 maybe, then I've got a pretty good shot with a bye going into the playoffs, and then anything can happen. And I trust myself to set up my team enough through the bye week that, all of these have the advantage going into at least the semis.
That's excellent. So your opponent this week was Ben, who isn't able to be with us right now, I don't believe. I don't think Ben's on the call.
Yeah, he said he might try to make it at some point. He had a work thing come up. I just have a quick question I wanted to ask, related to something Dustin said. I think it was interesting because Dustin's being super humble, saying so much luck came into his win. I'm curious to know for other people on the panel, how many people feel like luck is the
main reason for their loss versus, I messed up, I made a bad move. I'd be curious to know if anyone else feels like, man, this would have been mine, except this one key injury hit me at the worst time or something like that.
Is it about you take the blame yourself, or do most of the time you just chalk it up to, well, I made the best decision I could at the time? The rest is chance.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyone have any thoughts on that?
I might jump in there and just say that my own personal strategy was to, not overpay for guys in the draft, which left me with a lot of mid-range guys. A lot of whom I then lost during the season. Well, not a lot of whom, but a few of whom I lost during the season. And it kind of made me rethink my strategy for next season a little bit. The postponed games, I don't know, it's hard to quantify for me how the luck went. Was I more lucky than my opponents? Was I less lucky? And then also you obviously have the schedule luck, where you happen to be playing a guy who, doesn't score too well against you on the week. But in terms of injury luck, I felt like I had bad luck in terms of postponed games. I probably broke even. And in terms of schedule luck, I think I had a bit. So I think over the course of the season, it played out pretty neutral for me.
I'll say this, though, Mark, looking at your draft here, and you're right, you didn't spend more than $30 on anyone. You had 13 guys that you spent $10 or more on. But at the end of the day, you had just as many points, if not more, than Dustin. Accumulated a couple of points accumulated throughout the year, right? So, between injuries, between randomly who you end up playing, and again, this is a tight league. Dustin finished the season at 9-3. There were 4 of you right behind him at 8-4. So it really was anyone's game. Elon, for example, you accumulated the most cupful points of anyone in the division by far, with over 3,200 points to Dustin had just over 3,000. How do you feel being in the third place game, even though you had accumulated all the points?
The thing is, I could just be oh, head-to-head sucks, it's so unfair. But it's I did actually have this in my hands, because as we were talking about off the air, I had a matchup against Dustin in week 2 that if I could have beaten him in that week, then I would be in first place, and I would have played, I guess, I don't know, I would have been playing Ben in the finals here, and it would have been a whole different story potentially. Or I guess who knows what Dustin would have done if he didn't get the bye, and how he would have done in the quarters and semis. So yeah, I blame it on myself, but I also blame it on Kevin Fiala getting suspended. That was unjust. Either don't suspend him, or if he's suspended, let me stash him in an NA or IR plus spot. Come on, Yahoo. One player that really jumped to my mind, by the way, I just remember seeing a lot of, this was the season of bad luck, right? And I remember Jeff was really hit hard with those North Division games being postponed, and like the Canucks being going on that long COVID lead. And then like, I know you were riding McDavid, and then McDavid only had like that like 1 game week and 2 game week.
What, Logan?
Yeah, I was like 3rd in total points with 3 weeks to go, and then that happened.
Yeah, so
I lost out.
Yeah. It's wild because I remember at the start of the year, Jeff, you were like really sort of benefiting from the good luck because you were like mostly North Division teams, and you were like saying in the chat how like, you had or correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you like made an effort to draft Northern Division teams because you thought maybe COVID wouldn't hit you, and then look what happened. It's crazy.
No, not because of COVID, because their goalies and defense are bad.
Right.
And I thought it was going to be the highest scoring division, and it was. Like, that part of the process worked. Like, I had the highest point total of the week 3 times this year, including against you.
Oh my God. That was honestly, I think that my team, this is the last thing I'll say, unless John wants to ask me more like about my team. Like I think my team spiraled, and it started with like, you destroyed me, and then like Lewis destroyed me. And then I started getting really nervous that I might miss the playoffs. And that's when I traded Tom Tavares, like, cause I was nervous about him only having 2 games 1 week. And then I also like dropped. I don't know. I feel like I freaked out. I think I would have made the playoffs even if I did lose that week to Ben, and I probably should have just held like Tavares. And I also traded Taylor Hall to Kyle Palmieri, which did help me win a matchup. But maybe if I would have been able to sneak through, I could have like actually benefited from having in the playoffs Hall and Tavares, who Hall obviously turned out really well. So yeah.
But I think that's the interesting thing about your team is that different from Dustin, who, took some big swings and they all really paid off. You took Zibanejad, Hall, Fiala, Riley. Like, I don't think a lot of these guys were as successful as you had originally hoped them that they would be. And yet you still were able to wind up with the most points in the division.
It's too bad Jordan's not here. He was like offering me Pettersson for Zibanejad like all throughout the season. And I kept on like becoming so close to accepting it. I know Brian was like telling me I should have accepted it. And then like the way things turned out, obviously Zibanejad heated up. And then I think who ended up with Pettersson? Because I know he like kind of went around, a few people took their turns on him. Do we know where he landed? Maybe it's obviously not a good end where he didn't.
He wound up with Jesse.
Oh, Ben.
I wanted him to wind up with me, but Ben kept countering me. I think Ben countered me 3 times this season.
I was obviously right to target you, Dustin.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, look, I see 3 trades that you actually went through with, Dustin. With Jeff, you got Horvat and Myers for Zadina and Severson. With Dave, you got Malkin and Yandel for Stasny and Pulak. And with Elon, you got Sagan for Palmieri. So I'm not sure any of that did much for you.
Well, yeah, not Segs or Malkin for sure, because they didn't play a game for me. Would have been nice just to get him in on the Saturday, just to say that I did it for something. But I didn't actually give up guys that I would have rostered anyway. They wouldn't have made it to my playoff roster, so didn't feel like it was a huge loss. Horvat was nice. I feel like he might have performed above replacements in the handful of games that I had him for. So thanks, Jeff, for that. But yeah, I mean, lots of my trades didn't really provide a lot of tangible value. I didn't really make a lot of big swings that way.
And you didn't make any trades right until up near the deadline too.
I had one earlier. I had I traded Gurionov and Justin Falk for Ryan Pulak and Cal Palmieri. So a bit of a wash, not really making any waves there.
Yeah. Well, I want to get Tom in here for a second, because Tom is actually in the other super relevant matchup this week, which was the battle for 7th place against Jordan, I believe.
Yeah, it was.
And so 7th place is critical because since Jeremy in tier 2 won the fast track, which gets him automatic promotion, but he also won promotion on its own as well. That means whoever's in 7th doesn't get relegated out of tier 1. So Tom, how is it going?
It's another week of me being beat by probably the top point getter in the week. I will be, I think, tier 2. So look out, tier 2. Here I come. It's been similar to Dustin. It's been a pretty chaotic week of a lot of ups and downs. It's upsetting. I was hoping to kind of pull it off because my team was kind of streaking there at the end. But I ran into a lot of hot hands this year. I don't think I can count how many times I ran into a top 5 team of the week. I'd always be 6th to 9th and never come away with the W.
That makes a lot of sense. Coming out of the draft, you were very goalie heavy. You'd spent big on Vasilevsky. You spent big on Hellebuck. Was that your strategy? And do you like that strategy based on what happened?
I actually can't complain. It wasn't really my strategy. I saw the numbers being super low and was I think these 2 goalies especially will pay off, and they did. So I'm not upset with that because Vazzy and Helly did really, really well for me. I think similar to kind of Marcus, I had the same strategy of kind of get a lot of mid-tier, hope for some upswings, and then, if people have to leave, they have to leave. But I was hit by postponed games. It felt like every week. Hit by injuries, random suspensions where I had to drop people to try to make a run. I feel like I was constantly battling things and little things of changes happening right before a game. And then it would change the whole swing of a week.
You made a couple deals throughout the year with Elon Hall. You got Hall for Eberle and you got Tavares for Meyer and Erik Karlsson.
And those were truly just to kind of stock up for the consolation. I kind of saw the end. I think Lewis had a really good week there at the end where I needed that to get into sort of contention for that 6th spot. He was having a good week and a little bit of help from his buddy Ben. So I decided to make a couple swings to help me later on for that 7th spot. And they paid off decently well.
That's awesome. Do you have a takeaway for next year?
Don't auction draft. No, I probably wouldn't go. I'd probably go one heavy goalie if you can in a good sort of. There's a good price range. But realistically, this year was so kudos to Dustin. This is such a hard year to win. I felt not only just week by week trying to keep up with guys and do good moves, but trying to keep up with that, but also just the mental exhaustion of this year was so much difficult, so much harder than previous years where I felt really into it. By kind of halfway through the year, I was just gassed, truly just keeping up with everything and trying to fight things. I was just gassed and kind of checked out to some degree. So I think kudos to Dustin and everyone else that did really, really well. This was just a tough year. So it's hard to really base my strategies when I look at me compared to others. I think I had 8 times going against a top 5 team in a week, where I would be just under them or around that. So I can't really complain or change strategy too much. Kind of stick to my guns.
Elon, you wonder?
Yeah, I was gonna say, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong. You came from tier 3 last year, jumped straight up to tier 1. So I guess it's only fitting that now you take a round in tier 2 before you come back up here to get the full couple experience.
Being sent down to the AHL, so put my time. I'll come back up soon, swinging hard.
Right, yeah, you jumped up from the O right to the big leagues, and now you're going to spend some time with the pros.
Exactly.
Some seasoning. I want to get to Ben because I don't know if we have him for a short period of time or not. Ben, you just spent the finals watching things go up and down, and it looked like on Saturday there might have been a chance. How are you feeling during the week?
Oh, God, such a tough question to answer. Emotionally, I think that this week was very difficult to come into after my matchup with Elon because it was just that was so exhausting already. And that featured so many ups and downs that once I finally had the nail in Elon's coffin, there was a huge emotional wave that sort of left me feeling kind of unprepared for this week. And then, it starts right away. But the nice thing about the finals week is that there is no long term. So you don't really I say that I felt unprepared for that week, but I really just had to put in one claim, right? I had an empty slot because I think it was Ghost got hurt on Sunday. And so, I threw in an ad, and it was really just to call back to what Tom just said. Like, this season was so exhausting. There were so many times where I just felt burnt out, and, playing during the pandemic is unfun, I would say, relative to previous years. The competition of Tier 1 made this incredible and made this an extremely fun season. But I definitely, I would take playing in a non-pandemic year any day over going through the gauntlet over the past few months. But basically, it was just nice this week to not really have to tilt too hard over any of the decisions I made, because there were no long-term consequences. So my one regret is that I didn't spend an ad on Saros on Monday. I figured, he's probably not going to play both sides of the back-to-back. He did. And then, of course, he delivers the shutout last night. I definitely should have added Saros. But, other than that, midweek, I felt like I was probably done. Things were looking pretty dire, and then started to get my hopes up just a touch on Saturday. But I had already pretty much accepted and processed a little bit of that defeat. So it felt like, I felt like I had some money in the bank just by having a little bit of a chance last night. Overall, though, I was just glad that I was able to go to sleep at a normal time last night, because I had pretty much lost hope by the time the late game started, and I worked early this morning. So I just really didn't want to have to stay up all night just tilting my face off and then find out that I lose, at 2 or 3 a.m. local time. So yeah, no, overall, I had a good week. I enjoyed being in the finals. It's just, it's a gauntlet.
You made a lot of deals this year.
Yeah.
With a bunch of different people. You acquired a lot of players. You traded some of those players again. You acquired Backstrom. You traded Backstrom. You acquired Pettersson. You traded Pettersson. Like, what's your motivation for making deals? Are you just there trying to eke out a little bit of extra from a slot than another guy that you think does? Are you trading guys that you're like, I don't like this guy anymore? Are you trading guys because you're like lost a week and you're panicked? What is your reasoning for trades?
Yeah, I think the first thing that you said there, this tier it's very difficult to find advantages. I'm in a lot of leagues. This is the only one where I don't feel like I really have like any particular innate advantage over another team, whether it's, strategy or timing or whatever it is. But it's, going into the draft, I had really very little strategy. I had some tiers and I winged it. Did not like my team coming out of the draft, so I felt like I was going to have to make moves. And I really just looked at trades this year as a way to find some amount of marginal improvements in my roster. And in previous years, I haven't made very many moves. I think I played a little bit scared in the past. And this year I just decided, like, there's not enough time to get scared. You just got to go for it. And so I just played as hard as I could to win. And that's kind of what my motivation was to make moves.
So if we're going to talk about trades, though, of course, we probably should talk to Dave Betton, because Dave Betton is the cause of most trades, apparently, in Tier 1. Of the 22 trades I saw in Tier 1, you appear to have made 12 of them, Dave. So what is your reasoning for the deals you make? Why are you the kind of player that likes to make so many deals?
Well, I mean, especially this year, I typically wouldn't trade this much, but I was very aware of the fact that there was just 12 matchups this year. And so just after the third week, where typically you'd be like, oh, well, that's nothing. But I was like, geez, we're a quarter of the way through here. And I definitely made some panic trades. And then other times when I had my big splurge of trades in the middle of the year, it was just to trade at that point. But through counters, I was able to get some decent deals there. But at this point, I was definitely feeling the pressure and just trying to make things happen more times and not necessarily. And a lot of times it was just trades to kind of bait people in the counters.
And there were a lot of counters in Tier 1 this year. For anyone who's not aware of the mechanic, whenever a deal is put through on Yahoo, everyone else in the league has 24 hours to make a counter offer to one of those managers for the exact same players. And there were a bunch of counters throughout the year. There was also a flurry of counters right near the end of the trade deadline there. And that seemed to cause a little bit of consternation in the Discord chat there. Dave, I believe you might have been a little upset at some of the countering that was going on.
I got hoodwinked. I got bamboozled. I got betrayed by my good buddy Ben. And I felt used.
How do you feel about that, Ben?
Well, I honestly thought that, first of all, I feel like everything that I did was legal. I originally made a trade with Jesse. It was in a must-win week for me. And at the beginning of the week, I appeared to be in a very safe position. And then as the week came closer to the end, actually, I was matched up against Dave, I believe, at this point. And in doing the trade, I had to, I was trading Pedersen rather, and I was trading him for Fab. And to trade a player, you need to be able to receive a player back because of the Yahoo mechanic. And so in putting through the trade, Pedersen being on my IR, I was adding a new player to my active roster. So I was going to have to drop a player to make the deal. And then a day or two, I guess the next day, I had a roster spot open up because another player went on IR. So I sort of thought to myself, this sucks. Is there any way that I can avoid having to drop Christian Dvorak, who has a Sunday game, which could end up, if things continue to tighten up, it could end up costing me my week, could cost me my playoff spot. And so what I did was I went to look for counters to see if I could get out of my trade. In my mind, my hope was that I would be able to renegotiate the trade that I had to receive $40 Fab. But before doing that, I wanted to at least make sure that I wasn't going to lose another game played that week. So I went out, I asked a few folks, would you counter this Pedersen deal? Dave answered quickly, which is part of why I like dealing with Dave, is that he's not afraid to sort of make offers. He's not afraid to give, to make a swap. A lot of people are, and that's totally fine, but that is a different strategy. And so Dave ended up taking a counter. Once the counter was made, I reached back out to Jesse, made our new counter for a similar deal to the original. And I understand that hurt Dave's feelings. He felt very betrayed and hoodwinked, which I get it from the perspective. We worked together quite a bit on deals throughout the year, but I felt like it was very much something that Dave had done to me earlier in the year when he accepted a counter from me in a deal that he had with Dustin before immediately accepting essentially the same deal from Dustin for $5 Fab extra. So in my head, it was, an identical situation, but obviously Dave did not enjoy it, and I felt bad for making Dave feel like I was using him.
I feel like, John, since I asked you to host this reunion show and was saying like you should be doing a Jeff Probst impression on a Survivor reunion, I feel like it's your job now to be like, so how are you guys now? Like, is there any bitterness?
We do not talk. Dave blocked me on all social media. He has revoked my invite to future Stream Scheme episodes. No, I'm kidding.
And I was mainly being such a jerk, admittedly, after the fact, just because since I was trying to get around the rules to somehow not let it go through. And so I was definitely kind of playing it up there just to try and get the rest back at him.
And your big complaint was that it was actually going past the trade deadline, right? Because the trades kept going back and forth and they could be countered. The trade deadline had already passed. And you're like, this could just ping pong back and forth all the way to the playoffs.
Yeah, so I can point out as commission, Brian and I don't think we've confirmed this yet, but we talked about it. I'm pretty sure we're gonna be making a change to the rules next year. This isn't 100%, but maybe we'll call it Ben's rule or Dave's rule or something. But I think we're just gonna be no counters, any trade that happens, after the trade, once the trade deadline passes and Yahoo doesn't let you put in trades, then it's no counter offering the trades, and then it's just regular veto processes, because that was very annoying. Because also then there was we have to put in the trade manually, but then we couldn't because someone I think Jesse needed to drop a player in order. So then we're
we both had to drop someone, and it was the only players we had to drop were players who were going that day, and it was this thing of so I am gonna have to end up dropping somebody even anyway. Yeah, it was craziness.
So is there anyone?
I personally don't think we need a trade deadline.
Oh yeah,
and I mean considering someone was Tom was talking about loading up for the relegation playoffs, no one's really eliminated until the playoffs happen. So
I guess that's
it's not like people are
interesting.
dumping players for that, because they're out of it.
It's true. And with the counter mechanic, even if you did try and sell someone off, someone else could make a better deal. But I mean, 13th and 14th are out of it.
Yeah.
According to the Yahoo
like you could
settings,
just lock teams when they're eliminated.
Yeah, Yahoo does
That's
that
also true.
automatically. So like there's a setting. So okay, I have a list of rule change ideas to consider over the summer. So I'll put that in.
I don't know. I feel like that is that even crazier, unexpected rule than last year when I proposed no benches. And one of you, I think Brian was like, I love that. I've been saying that for years. And Elon's like, no one will play this game if we get rid of benches.
Well, just because I added this suggestion to the list. We add like 10 suggestions to the list every year and implement like one every 2 years. So we'll see.
Elon, having played an FHT now, has that changed your opinion on no benches?
Okay, so that's interesting. I'll be curious to get your thoughts. Like you're all like the biggest fantasy experts. And by the way, let me reiterate again how crazy this league was. Like it's wild that people like, Jeff and Dave and Tom didn't even make the playoffs when we're talking about like really amazing fantasy players. Because that's what's going to happen when you have all winners coming into a division. But so we were talking about no benches. Yeah, we're in this one league where there's no benches on Fantrax. And you just like draft a super deep league, but that also included a maximum number of goalies. You're only allowed 3 goalies. Like in Cupful, it would be weird because if we did no benches, then theoretically we would have to then just have 2 goalie spots, I guess. In which case, you would have to only.
No. Why can't you have more goalies if you want to? Like Yahoo doesn't prevent players, even if you have no bench. Yahoo doesn't prevent players from being on the bench.
Oh,
it's just then there's an open slot. So you'd have an open util slot or whatever in your thing because there's a random guy on your bench. Like I can take guys off. You can go on right now and take all the players off your roster and you just have dashes there.
That's a good point. So you're saying like I could still draft 4 goalies.
Yep.
But then you're just taking away from active spots.
But the advantage of drafting 4 goalies is slightly less because now when I draft all skaters, every single one of my skaters will play every night.
Let me tell you one advantage of having no benches that I just thought of recently, which is like beyond, like I know, John, you had like suggested like mathematical reasons why it's actually not even an advantage to have it in terms of fairness. But another reason I just realized is like a big part of commissioning the Cupful is checking to see if people are setting their lineups because you don't want to have an unfair matchup where people have like players on their bench. So if you just guaranteed that everyone's rostered players are always getting points, yeah, there could still be teams that aren't managing their teams, like not putting injured players in IR and like that kind of thing. But it would kind of make things more fair in terms of like an inactive team because we might not catch it for a week, so at least an inactive team wouldn't totally be a guaranteed loss like it is currently. So yeah, it's on the list. It's already on the list actually, but I didn't think about this idea that you'd still be able to have more goalies.
Credit Karma has always been there to help you make better financial decisions, and now they want to help you even more. With the Credit Karma Money Spend account, you can be rewarded for good money habits. Credit Karma Money is a brand new checking account where you can win cash reimbursements for making purchases. Just pay with your debit card, and if you win, you'll be notified on the spot, and your Instant Karma cash will be added back to your spend account. Open your FDIC insured spend account for free. There's no minimum balance requirements, no overdraft fees, and free withdrawals from a network of over 50,000 ATMs. And when you make a purchase between June 8th and June 30th, you'll automatically be entered to win $1 million. Right now, visit creditkarma.com/winmoney to open your free account and start winning instant karma. Go to creditkarma.com/winmoney to sign up for free and start winning. That's creditkarma.com/winmoney. Instant Karma is sponsored by Credit Karma. No purchase necessary. Exclusions and terms apply. See rules. Banking services provided by MVB Bank Incorporated. Member FDIC. Maximum balance and transfer limits apply.
So we talked about trades and counters. I wanted to know if anyone here has ever refused a counter because they're like, I don't want to be that guy that accepts a counter. Or has anyone here made a pre-deal where they're like, we're not accepting counters on this?
Oh, yeah. In a lot of my trades, it's like we're saying that we're going in like no counters and stuff like that. And like, I'm blatantly lying, but I'm hoping that the other person is staying true to their word.
So tier 2, watch out. Or what tier are you in next year, Dave, at this point?
3, I think, unless some
Tier
people drop
3.
out. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Honest Dave Betton.
Honest Dave Betton.
I want to captain commish that league, please.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to figure that would be wild to it's hard to imagine like any of you like not in tier 1 or tier 2, you know. It's just like the who's who. Hey Marcus, I was curious to ask you if you don't mind, like what was it like being the host of the Stat Attack and then, you know, for 1 year and then like being in tier 1 the next year, and like the podcast is sort of like that you did is now like you're in the main league with one. Like I don't know, was there anything surreal about that?
Yeah, I suppose it was a little bit surreal. The biggest thing for me is just the workload of being in tier 1 in terms of prep for the auction draft, in terms of just staying on top of your game and you know, staying, particularly when you're based on this side of the Atlantic, staying in touch with what's happening in the NHL, because, you know, I don't watch it every night. If I get to watch maybe 2 games a week, I'm lucky. And that's generally the weekend matinees. So, but then having to do the work for the podcast as well. It's just a lot of work. But yeah, it was great. Like, it's great to be able to chat. So the whole genesis, I suppose, of the Stat Attack podcast was to speak to the guys who know the game best and who perform best. So getting to talk to Dustin this season and Tom last season, and, you know, the guys whose team names are appearing at the top of the fast track standings, shall we say, or the overall points leaderboard throughout the entire cupful. I've learned so much from speaking to guys on that, and, you know, some of it is practical tips where they're saying, you know, they're giving you advice on things that you can do to improve yourself. But some of it also is just a feeling and understanding, you know, what kind of people make good fantasy hockey managers. And, you know, all of you guys you're in the top tier for a reason, and it's been a real privilege to be there this season, and to be able to, like, even to get top 4 this season was massive for me. I was under no illusions that this was going to be difficult. I'd never done an auction draft before, so it was all brand new to me. I put a lot of time in, and between the Stat Attack, speaking to all the guys last season, and again this season, and between, you know, just being in the league, it's really leveled me up, let's say.
Are you able to quantify in any way the difference about tier 1 versus the other tiers, whether it's the level of competition or how everyone interacts with each other?
Quantify. So I'll say maybe there are 2 things. One thing is you can't blink. You can't, you know, if a guy comes into the league, say Cole Caulfield, and is on NA, you know, Elon's going to have him on the NA spot within, you know, minutes, relative minutes. Particularly for me, again, being on this side of the Atlantic, it's difficult to stay up with the news. When I had Elon on the show, on the Stat Attack podcast, he recommended Max Comtois as his player for the rest of the season, and Comtois kind of came good for a few weeks straight after that. So keeping your finger on the pulse is really one of the biggest assets that everybody in this league has, compared to maybe the lower tiers where the interest level, you know, it's high, but it's not kind of insanely high. And the other thing, which I've mentioned a few times on the Stat Attack podcast, is just the level of, you know, gamesmanship. I can see Dave laughing there. Dave's probably the number 1 guy in the entire cupful for that kind of thing. He loves to wind people up and, you know, play the game to the very edge of the game and try and garner any advantage he can by, you know, like what he was saying earlier about agreeing to trades and with no counters, and then maybe accepting counters, things like that. Just, I can't think of anything really else off the top of my head, but you really need to both have your wits about you in terms of what's going on in the league, and have your wits about you in terms of what's going on in the cupful league, so the NHL and the cupful.
Tom, you want to share something?
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like there's like 1,000 more messages, even though our like main thread wasn't busy. The direct messages compared to previous years and other divisions was way more. I know that, like, I'll quantify one thing. I think there's a podcast advantage. I'm very clear on that. I've made it known on our forums. I think there's a podcast advantage for 2 in the group. I won't name names or anything else like that. But definitely there's a lot of like doing things to like throw other matchups off to help you later on, like to help you standings wise. While like before in other divisions, you kind of like stuck to your lane and it's like, okay, I got to do what's best for me. But now you're trying to like maybe make a trade that sort of has a slight advantage for you later on or things like that. So there's definitely a lot of gamesmanship as compared to other leagues.
Tom, I got to say, you were saying this when Lewis and I made a trade. Your matchup had nothing to do with that trade at all. Like, I really don't know why you think that there was some sort of like attempt to help one another. We just made a trade that did not benefit you. And it seemed like you were just salty about that.
Yeah, definitely salty. But at the same time, if I would have won that week, I would have beaten Lewis and would have been in like the main playoffs. So that trade for me was a big piece. And kudos to Ben and everyone else that dealt with me that week, because I sent out, I think, like 10,000 messages, especially to Ben. I literally threw everything at him and he stuck really true to it. And I would just, at some point, I just like crossed the train tracks and was like, I'm just going to stir this up because I want some drama. But at the same time, that trade, the Washington-Philadelphia trade, it didn't help me in the future week, but I needed that week against Lewis. And I was trying to get a counter to happen so that Lewis didn't have the extra games played on Sunday, thinking that would definitely have helped me. Because when you're playing at that level, like the amount of times that like Sunday decisions switched was crazy compared to other leagues. So I was just trying to disrupt that. And and then it got to a point where I was just going Dave betting. So
I wonder, is it like then more impressive that Dustin won, considering he doesn't host a podcast and he didn't have a podcast advantage?
He was on the stat attack. He was on the stat attack. Dustin, you got the stat attack bump.
I was a guest. I was a guest on a podcast, but you guys are all seasoned vets. Little old me taking you out.
I think Tom.
I was a little perturbed about that Washington Philly trade between Ben and Lewis as well, because I was going up against Ben in week 12. And if I had lost week 11 against Jeff, then I would have actually needed to win that week. So I thought about speaking up, but I figured, hey, I mean, I wouldn't do any better. Like, I would definitely do something like that if it would benefit me.
What is the belief that was bad about this trade? Is it seen as particularly lopsided? I guess I'm confused about this.
The voting.
So let's clarify what was
the think so.
No, John's got a good point. Maybe
let's clarify what the trade was. Unlike Survivor, not everyone has watched every episode of what's been going on in your lives. So we do need to clarify what was the trade, when did this happen, and what was the trade?
Well, it was Couturier and JVR for Backstrom and Oshie, and somebody else, Bobrovsky, was in there too, right? I think that's what the deal was. And I did feel like I was getting an advantage, but I think Ben was already looking at the playoffs where he knew that there was that 2-game week for Washington. He knew that Washington would be shut out on the Saturday of the finals, obviously. So, I think he was looking, Ben was already looking ahead, I think, at that point to winning later. And I was in a mood where, I had lost to Dave by a 5th of a point or a 20th of a point. And I had then kind of spiraled and lost 2 more matches in a row before I kind of righted the ship. And so I was thinking more short term. And if I have to deal with 2 games of good players in the playoffs, then fine. I just need to kind of get to the playoffs. I don't want to get booted out of tier 1. So my feeling was I was thinking short term and Ben was thinking long term. But I think ultimately, and I ended up dropping Bobrovsky too before too long anyway. I don't know. What do you think? What is your thoughts on this, Ben?
I had an extra, I needed to get somebody off my roster to make roster space. I had a lot of players on IR. I had a full IR at the time. So I needed to go 3-2. And I really wanted to stack up on Philly players because that 5-game week was coming up. And I knew I needed a guaranteed win to get me into the playoffs. And honestly, I thought that I got the 2 best forwards in the deal. It didn't work out that way. Oshie was far better than JVR the rest of the way. But yeah, I honestly thought I was getting the better side of the deal.
When you make deals, Ben, like that one, for example, with Lewis, who you obviously know very well, you made 5 deals, as far as I can tell, with Dave, 2 with Jordan, 1 with Jesse. Are you the kind of player that has like go-to people that you're like, I want to make a deal, I think I can deal with these people? Or do you just send random offers out and see who bites on them? And since apparently Dave always wants to trade, he bites most of the time.
I mean, yeah, all of that. Because to me, trading in fantasy hockey is, a distinct skill set. Like it's obviously part of it, but like most people have a very static approach to trades. It's like, I'm only going to make a trade if I can like guarantee that I'm going to win, and I'm going to negotiate in that way. And you'll like make offers to some people who, you know, the way that they respond will dictate whether you're going to come back to them with a trade in the future, whether it's intentional or not, right? Like I've made offers to people and their counter was so blatantly unequal that I just was like, well, I'm probably not going to make anything work with this person. And so my strategy with trades is just to approach everybody from a level that I would talk to them normally. Dave is somebody, like I mentioned this earlier, the reason why I ended up making my counter deal with Dave is because he's a fast trader. You can go to him and be like, what do you think about this? And he'll be like, no, or yes, or he'll say, no, but I would do this. And you know, sometimes it's not going to be something that you want, but I would say far greater chance that it will be workable. And then, you know, somebody like Lewis, I actually was avoiding trading with most of the year because I kind of felt like this is a guy I'm going to have to talk to twice a week about fantasy. I'm not going to be able to like pull the wool over his eyes for fear of like, you know, creating this awkward real life situation where I have to navigate it. But in the end, you're able to find, if you're looking for it, you can find deals that might benefit both of you in distinct ways. And so I basically look at trades as win-win opportunities. And I approach people based on if I think that we can both benefit from making a swap.
Have any of you felt like through all the trading, through all the talking on Discord, like this year, have you gotten closer to any of your fellow Tier 1 members? Have you made any new friends, gotten to know anyone better in particular?
No, I hate Ben now.
A new enemy was made.
I definitely think so. Like, I definitely talk to a lot of these folks regularly. Jordan's not here, but that's somebody I didn't know at all who I would now consider a friend. So I think so for me.
It's too bad that A, COVID, and B, we live all over the world, because it would be fun to have I'll go for beers or something and continue this reminiscing offside of Zoom. But yeah, it's been cool talking to different people for sure.
We should get an apartment together.
Yeah.
Reality show.
Would that be the ultimate reality show? Lock 14 fantasy managers together in an apartment?
Oh my God. Yes, a fantasy league. And it's like unlimited moves, unlimited ad drop, like something crazy, you know, where it's just like there's moves happening all the time.
So that's all they have. You generate it so that, like, as you've established, Tier 1, as was said, Mark was saying, you have to pay super close attention to it. So you generate the settings so that you have to pay even more attention to it. It literally has to consume your entire life. Otherwise, you won't be able to get ahead.
That would be insane. And then obviously the games could be broadcast.
That's
right. I guess maybe it'd be easier because then I guess we'd be leaving our families and like jobs behind so we can focus only on hockey.
That's true. How do you guys find it balancing jobs, families, things like that?
I know Lewis had a new kid recently. I'd imagine that was difficult.
I mean, you know, I can rock a baby and be on the Yahoo app on my phone simultaneously. Luckily, it's easier than a lot of other things that I have to do with a new kid running around. You know, I think the biggest challenge was actually trying to balance podcasting and new baby. Just making sure that everyone was in bed at a time when Ben and I could actually meet up was sometimes a bit of a challenge there. But no, it was okay. I think fantasy works pretty well. Yeah, what's up, bud?
Example in real time.
Well, and the draft where Lewis, I just remember in the draft, Lewis was the babysitter canceled on him.
Oh my God, I forgot about that. Yeah, that was an adventure too.
I feel like I it's kind of weird that like Easterners and anyone that is Eastern Standard Time is like super lucky. So Dustin, Mark, anyone else that like is in other time zone, Ben, it's tough. I like took on so much more this year with COVID, and I found myself going to bed at like 8:15, like 8:30, and like hours before like going to sleep, I was doing the things that I had to do like from a family perspective. So I found there were so many times that I like missed out on like putting in claims, like, and a whole lot of other things that change so fast, like Vancouver and a bunch of other things like that really derailed so many plans, but I wasn't able to like put the time in to do the things that I would have regularly done this year. And it's mostly because the time zones in like the amount of times that I woke up at like 2:08 or 2:21 a.m. So then it would match like the GMT time or whatever that time zone is before 3 a.m. in the morning Eastern time to like put my claims in, because I'm like, I forgot. And I would just subconsciously wake up in the morning to be like, I got to make a claim, because I didn't do it because I was so gassed from the day. Like, kudos to you guys in other time zones, because that sucks.
Mark?
Yeah, if I can just jump in here. So my employers, pretty much before COVID, but since COVID as well, they think that I'm this like super dedicated guy because I'm always in work at 7:15 in the morning. But it's actually because the day cut off on Yahoo is 8 a.m. So I'm just getting into work to get those 45 minutes to find out what happened last night and make my moves. But yeah, like that's one of the advantages, and Dustin might agree with me here on this side of the water, is that we can wake up early the next morning and see what's happened the night before, whereas you guys, it's literally the middle of the night. So it maybe swings
I would
and
reiterate
roundabouts.
that, because when I was in the Eastern time zone, I was always, waiting up late to try to see what happened in the late night games and trying to edge in a little advantage by seeing what happened in those games. And I'd ultimately end up putting in ads at 2:00 in the morning, and that's no fun. So I found it actually a little bit easier to manage getting up at 6 and having a couple hours to review what happened while everybody's sleeping, and maybe get a bit of an advantage in that way.
Yeah, I feel like maybe there's a problem also if you're like an obsessive person like me. Like I found like I kind of wish the deadline was like at 1 a.m. or like even 2 a.m. rather than 3 a.m. just because sometimes I'll just be like rethinking my decision, like I can't go to sleep. So I'm like, wait, should I bid $1 or $2? Or like maybe I should put this guy ahead, and which goalie's even gonna play? And I'm back on Twitter, like, did the Nashville announce what their starting goalie is gonna be? No, they never announced who their starting goalie is gonna be. And I was like, it was just like, and then finally 3:00 passes. I'm like, I gotta get to bed. Like, at least it's over now.
I have considered how moving to the West Coast would be a lot better, because then at least it would happen at midnight and then you could just not worry about it after that.
Yeah.
But maybe to just show the global nature of the cupful here, can we go around the table a bit and everyone say where they're from? So like, Dustin, where are you right now?
I am from Toronto, but for the last 8 or 9 months, I've been living in London in the UK.
And Dave?
Pittsburgh, PA, USA.
And Elon?
Good old Toronto, Canada, Dustin's hometown.
And Mark?
Dublin, Ireland.
Tom?
Belleville, Ontario, Canada.
Lewis?
Kalamazoo, Michigan, home of the Cupful Chell team. I noticed the other day when I was watching their Twitch stream.
And Ben?
I'm in St. John, New Brunswick, which is Atlantic Standard Time, 1 hour ahead of the Eastern time zone. So the day is 4 a.m. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I learned something new from that whole experience.
Has anyone ever here been in any leagues where it's not like waiver wire, where it's like everyone's a free agent, you can pick them up whenever you want?
Yeah, I can't get my keeper league to switch to Fab. I wish they would, but they don't want it. It's too easy for people who are on Twitter all the time, like me, to just go in and suck up all the good free agent options. Or I can go to someone who has a crappy team and be like, "Hey, pick this guy up before the second place team does."
So who here has set an alarm for 3:00 in the morning so that they got up and were able to snag some guy?
Definitely.
And my league, the guys in my league were like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Winning?
Winning.
Like, I won.
Exactly.
I won." Like, I don't know what else to say there.
You got to do what it takes. You don't want to put in a waiver claim. You just want to be the first one to grab the player once it clears waivers, clearly.
Mark?
Can I just flip things around and interview you for a second, John? This obviously wasn't pre-planned. How did your season go? I kind of stopped paying attention a little bit halfway through the season. How did you finish?
Maybe that could tie in actually to my closing out the show also, because we're going to be previewing next season of Tier 1 of the Cupful. I don't know if
that's right. Look out Tier 1. I'm currently up 286.5 to 194 in the finals. So I think I'm going to win today. I very rarely do I feel comfortable with something, but yes, we're at the point where I feel comfortable. It was fun. It was fun in Tier 3. Watching you guys in Tier 1 though too, Like I could see the differences. Like it was dead quiet in my division at the trade deadline. No one, everyone was like, "Nah, I'm kind of comfortable with my team or whatever," and so forth. And that was interesting. But we had some really good players. Like Ricard played a great season where he grabbed Pasternak, and that paid off big for him. And then weekly league, like at the end of the season, he had 3 Penguins, and I was terrified because I knew if they all hit, I had no chance, and they didn't. And so it turns into a blowout, but it shouldn't have been, right?
Yeah, I mean,
congratulations.
Yeah, that's really.
Sorry, I didn't know if you had a follow up. If the interview had a follow up, or if it was just one question.
One question shootout.
That'll be interesting. We're gonna have
looking forward to.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I was going to say looking forward to tier 1 next year. Go ahead, Elon.
I was just going to say, like, poor Brian, like, I think he found like a really good format for the tier 1 auction draft, having you as the co-host. And now he's going to have to go back to the drawing board to find someone else to host with him. Everyone keeps getting promoted.
Well, with all the people, all the great players that got dumped out of tier 1,
true, actually.
they'll have lots of people to choose from.
I believe Brian's listening. So yeah, I guess that's your new pool.
But before we move into Elon's preview of next year, the one person we didn't really talk too much yet about their team was Lewis. Because Lewis, your team was kind of in a no man's land there. Like we talked to Tom because he was in the consolation final. We talked to the other guys because they were in the semis and the finals. Lewis, you were in 5th place for the season. You lost in the quarterfinals. Like, what does that do to your season after that point? Like, technically you're still playing for positions after that, but like, how do you feel?
Sure. So, I mean, I felt like I felt okay about it. I ended the season where I ended in the overall ranking. So that was kind of a boring way to finish, I suppose. I had a little bit of mental trauma the last couple of weeks because I felt like I had some really good weeks after being eliminated, which was too bad, including even that 2-game Washington week. Still would have been fine. I scored really well in there. So that's tough. Thinking about how things might have been different, if I had gotten one extra, who was, I don't know, I was screaming at somebody to shoot the puck. Josh Norris. If Josh Norris had shot the puck in the waning moments of that match against Dave, I sometimes imagine how things might have turned out differently. I'm really glad to not have had to fight to not be relegated, because I feel like every year you get a chance in tier 1 is good. My dirty secret is I've been in tier 1 5 times and I've never won a playoff round. So that's sort of the hump that I need to get over. That's something that I've been very frustrated with.
Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
One thing that I would like to do, I think, next year in terms of how I built my team, and this was something you actually brought up in the when we did the auction draft initially, was I didn't have a ton of wiggle room in terms of easily droppable players, and I really felt good about waiting until I had like last guys in their tiers like Gensel and Connor and paying only what I sort of needed to get them. And some of those worked out pretty well. But what I would like to do maybe next time is spend a little more on, upgrade one of those $40 guys to a $60 guy who can really change a week. Because I felt like I didn't have someone like that so much. I had a lot of steady, reliable guys, but not big time game changers. And then that leaves me maybe a little more room at the bottom of my roster where I'm willing to turn people over a little faster. One thing that really did pay off for me well was I won Tony DeAngelo, and then I thought to be safe, I should win Adam Fox too. So I sort of look at that as paying, instead of 12 and 11 for those 2 defenders, as just paying $23 for whoever was going to end up as the power play 1 defenseman for New York. And DeAngelo helped me by being a total head case. That just sort of was, so I guess that was the type of player that was attracted to my roster, because I made that trade with Dave to get Biddington, who I thought would be kind of a solid guy who plays LA and San Jose a lot. And then while the trade was processing, he had his meltdown game where he kind of went crazy and then went on that horrible skid. So that was unfortunate too. Just a little too much crazy on my team this year, I think.
The draft is interesting too, because in those top 6 managers this year, none of you spent more than $45 on a single player. When we look at the big names, McDavid, McKinnon, Draisaitl, Like they're all on teams that wound up at the bottom of the table. Are we thinking that that is all random chance, or are we thinking that Mark's shaking his head though? But then again, Mark said he went too far the other direction, right? By balancing out his team too much.
Yeah, maybe too much, but that stat that you just gave there kind of reinforces my initial strategy. So maybe I'll rethink it in the next few months that we have to plan for next season.
I know if Jeff was still here, he'd say that he didn't mess up by spending all that money on McDavid. He just got screwed up by the schedule and all those Edmonton games getting canceled when he needed those wins.
Yeah, I think studs and duds can work really well when you're willing to go out and spend your fab fast and early. And this was the first year where I really felt like I spent my fab and never really had a point later on where I was like, oh, I wish I had, a few more dollars here or there. Like, I think they really paid off for the most part, either, turning to guys who were really productive for me, or then maybe became parts of a later trade. But, I had Robertson, I had JVR when he was really hot off the wire. Trying to think of a couple other guys, but I felt really good about blowing my fab fast, even though a lot of times I was spending way more than I needed to. I was doing that thing where it's like 2 a.m. I'm like, I gotta, push it up a few more dollars there.
Now, this was sorry, go ahead, Elon.
Oh, sorry. I mean, we could talk forever, right? There's so much to chat about. I was actually interested to look because you said this thing about how all the top scorers in Cupful ended up on non-playoff teams, but the inverse is actually true for defensemen. I just looked at the top ranking defensemen in Cupful, and actually the top 5 defensemen are all on teams that made the playoffs. And I don't know if you guys want to try to guess. So Lewis, you already mentioned Adam Fox, who you got in that cheap deal once you consider, or, you got in that smart draft of taking D'Angelo and Fox. He was 5th in Cupful score. Obviously, that's as of now. That includes the playoffs. But so 250 Cupful points. Anyone want to try to guess who the top 4 are above Adam Fox?
Well, you got Jacob Chikrin, but you only paid $3 for him.
Yeah, basically all this was just leading up to me bragging about how I got Chikrin for $3.
There you go.
Number 1 currently of all of the Cupful, Jacob Chikrin's currently
for
leading.
$3.
But how much did Nurse? Oh wait, I don't know if you guys want to, or maybe it's not good content to have like a bunch
no, go ahead.
Nurse was 14, I think. I got Nurse.
Nice.
I don't regret that though. I don't regret that.
And Dustin has one, probably the more. Well, actually, Dustin and Ben both have more obvious guys that were probably went for a lot of money.
But I'd say that's a unique difference here too between forwards and defensemen. We see that some of the top ranking defensemen there went for very little, whereas the top ranking forwards all went for a lot of money. Even Marner, who people would say overperformed this year, went for $41 in the draft, right? Whereas Dustin was saying he got Hedman for 36 and he was scared at paying too much. He thought he was paying too much for that, right?
Yeah,
so
Hedman really had an impressive season. So he's 3rd on the list.
Does that mean defensemen are the kind of player where it's possible to spend less and get these big swings? Because as a forward, I think we're fairly confident certain forwards are going to play on the top power play, but there was no guarantee Fox was going to be on the top power play, right? There may be certain ways that a defenseman is deployed that can change and create these wild swings as opposed to a forward.
I definitely think that's a good insight. By the way, so the names are Chikrin, Hamilton, Hedman, Nurse, Fox are the top 5. And yeah, so obviously Hamilton and Hedman went for a lot, and the other 3 you got it for pretty good deals. While other people, were spending lots of money on like the Roman Yozis and I don't know, Brent Burns maybe of the world who didn't do as well. But yeah, I think it's interesting. Actually, like going into this year's draft, I was specifically thinking I wanted to spend more of my money on forwards and less on defensemen, just because I figured you could get like a decent, reliable. Like I didn't think Chikrin obviously would be like as amazing as he was, but I figured like I could get like a Chikrin or a, like Ryan Ellis, like one of these just guys who like seems to always be good enough and like a solid player, and if you could get him for so cheap, so why spend a lot of money on a big name like Hedman? Obviously it worked out for Dustin, but it also could have been like Roman Josi. And I'm sure, Dustin, you would have, I'm sure if you would have been outbid for Hedman, you probably would have gone for Josi for the same price because Josi went for even more in the draft. So sometimes, a bit more luck, I guess, with spending on defensemen.
I would much rather 12 Jacob Chikrins for the price of one Hedman. That would have been nice. Just roster Jacob Chikrins.
That would be a good team.
You're going to get Elon all hot and bothered.
So does anyone have a different strategy now next year going into the draft from what they were planning this year?
Don't give him any information. He's trying to get information.
Oh, yeah.
No, everything exactly the same.
Oh, okay. I'll keep that in mind.
Tom, would you draft the two top, like, most expensive goalies again if you were doing an auction again?
Not next year. Like with the condensed schedule, I think this year is such an anomaly, and that's where like I'm so happy for everyone that's going on to tier one. I'm kind of like hurt that this was my one time in tier one and I'll be back. But that being said, it's like this year was so weird with like condensed schedules that it's hard to quantify like strategy from this year to next year. Really, truly, like I wouldn't go two goalies. I think I've been notoriously in other years to get to tier one have been like zero goalies and run who's hot and switch them out quick. However, with two goalies this year, it was good because they both did really, really well, but I was limited in movement. Like I couldn't move people nearly as much, and no one wants to take on a goalie. I think I offered Hellebuck to playoff people like no tomorrow because he had that, 11 days or 10 days of like no gains because of all of the North stuff and Vancouver stuff. So I probably wouldn't go as hot with goalies, but that being said, like, I don't think you can go wrong with Vasilevsky. Really, truly. I never really appreciated him until this year. Having him go in and the amount of shutouts that he would get, like, who knows? He might get a shutout today. It doesn't, I can jinx that because it's not going to help me at all. But like just so many in those points come in, but at the same time, next year will be so different.
Dave, you wanted to share?
Yeah, I was specifically avoiding, I mean, I always do, but specifically this year, I was avoiding studs and duds just for what came to fruition. All it takes is someone to be in contact with their family, and their whole team's out for like a week. And in a season where you only have 12 matchups, that could be devastating if you spent, like $80 on McDavid or something like that. And that's a huge part of your roster. The problem is that obviously a bunch of other people were thinking that too. And it only takes one other team to save their money for it to completely ruin your strategy later into the auction draft. So but I think like if you look at past seasons, like Jesse and Ben have done really good at studs and duds. So while it might be poo-pooed because of this past season, if it opens up the door for someone to do it next year, they could be in a pretty good spot.
Yeah,
I would call back to the goalie thing. I really think this year there was a lot of opportunity with goaltenders just because the AGAB discourse has really taken over in the cupful, where people are very hesitant to roster goalies and add goalies because, maybe they won't even start for you this week, or maybe like you have one game where they blow you up and then you're biased against them. You're not going to want them on your team anymore. There's so many opportunities to add goalies who are extremely valuable in the cupful, and I just felt like they were available throughout the entire season.
Which makes trades, like Tom was saying, nearly impossible. Like no one wants to trade a goalie or will give up anything valuable for them. Like I started the year with Lehner and Bishop on the IR, Bishop just sitting on my IR, which he did for the whole year. And at one point during the year, I had 4 goalies on my roster just from picking them up because people were dropping valuable goalies and they were worth something. And I ended the year with just Tristan Jarry. That was it. So a complete turnover of goalies throughout the year. I think with the depth of the league there and the way people feel about them, there's just not, they provide value and yet somehow they don't have value at the same time.
Well, I think also there's just so many teams that are playing like, tandems or just like running different goalies that they were just like, I'm sure if we were to count like how many goalies were fantasy relevant throughout the season, it's well more than the number that you can fit on all of the teams in a cupful division. Like, out of nowhere, like Jack Campbell and UC Saros, there was like weeks where I had both of them and they were like giving me huge wins until the playoffs when they anyway, but like, you know what I mean? Like there were all these like random goalies that just were sometimes popping up and doing amazing. If you take away bench spots, I'll definitely be probably running 2 high tier goalies. Yeah, that would make sense.
Probably not if there's still bench spots.
On the topic of studs and duds too, the one mea culpa I will share, which is so during the draft show, I made a very bold statement, which was I would have taken Austin Matthews first overall, right? I had him rated higher than McDavid and everyone else. And Matthews did good this season. Like he performed, I think he has the second most cupful points overall. And the reason I said which seems good from my perspective that, okay, that was a good choice. But the problem is McDavid did even better. And the reason I said McDavid wasn't my number one option was room for growth. I said he paced for 120 points last season. What do you expect him to do? Pace for 140 points this year?
Yep.
Apparently.
But to be fair, for the people who had McDavid in the fantasy regular season, it was more like that 120 point pace. You know, it was only like once you're eliminated with McDavid that these past couple of weeks, he's getting like, it's rare for him not to have 3 or 4 points a game. And now all of a sudden he's like potentially going to even hit 100 points on the season in a 56 game season. So that guy has just really turned it on even more than usual.
How much are we discounting certain things this year because of the pandemic, because of the divisions? Are we saying Matthews isn't going to get that many points next year? McDavid isn't going to get that many points next year? Are we adjusting our math in our spreadsheets for next year because of this? Because I plan to.
I mean, that's a fun one. Off the top of my head, obviously we're going to have a whole off season and I'm going to be reading a lot. Like it's always fun to see everyone's projections and hear everyone else's podcast about how they're projecting. I think it's like, you know, each player is its own specific example. Like off the top of my head, I'm just kind of thinking like it's more about, I think I'm going to not count the bad seasons as harshly. You know, like if a player had a really down year, I think there's like a lot more potential excuses for why they had a down year than usual. Cause like there could have been like different COVID exposures on their team or like, you know, obviously it's like each player is an individual case, but I feel like, you know, something like Carter Hart, I talked about with Slim Cliffy a couple of days ago. And it's like, he had a terrible year, but I'm not like, okay, Carter Hart sucks now. Like, I think it's very possible that, you know, on a normal off season and a normal season, maybe he comes in and Philly and he are, you know, back to being what we expected them to be.
I think I fade North Division. Like point production, I just think I fade it a little bit in relative compared to other divisions, just simply because of scoring. It won't be that high playing other teams' defenses and all of that kind of stuff. I think that just naturally happens.
Yeah, people might have overperformed. I know that Dom Lucian takes that into account in his spreadsheet. He like looks into like the teams they're playing and as he comes up with his model. So maybe now I'll bet you he'll do that too, like scale back some of these points. Maybe when he's doing his weightings, I know like the way he comes up with his projections is like very much like not his opinion at all. And he's just weighting like last year's stats, the previous year for different weights. So maybe he'll take into account, like which divisions they were in last year as part of the weighting. I think that would make a lot of sense.
So I've got 2 more topics I wanted to cover, and then Elon's got a great preview of next year's tier 1 for us. So the first thing was we were talking about trades. This was the first year that we were allowed to trade Fab. And a lot of you guys traded Fab. A lot of you guys countered by changing the amounts of Fab. There was one deal that had like $40 in Fab. Does anyone feel in a deal in which they received Fab that it was relevant or worth it to you? And how did you feel about that?
I'm happy to go first, I guess. Unless like I'll just say quickly, like I made a deal where I traded Taylor Hall for Fab to Tom. And I got Eberle, and then I used that. I believe that's the Fab that I used. Either I used that Fab to get those 2 Flames. I got Giordano, and I think I ended up using that Fab to get Giordano and Gaudreau after they were dropped, and I would have been able to get those guys otherwise. I specifically saw that Dustin had 11 Fab left, and he could use a defenseman. So I saw that I was higher in priority than him for the tiebreaker. So I bid Dustin on Giordano just to make sure I got him. Not that I got a chance to throw it in his face at any point in the playoffs, which would have been fun.
Until just now.
No, I mean, it would have been fun if Giordano just like scored a hat trick against you, of course. But
well, you did me a favor with Markstrom, so I got a little bit out of it too.
Yeah, that's true.
We traded Flames. How about that? Giordano wasn't mine to have, but we'll say that.
I think that the one thing that really stood out to me about tier 1 this year compared to what I assume it's like in all of the lower divisions in terms of trade activity is that being able to trade Fab essentially made it so that trading was like another roster move. You're essentially able to max out moves on your roster, and I don't know if other people were doing this, but like if on a Friday I was ahead by 50, I reached out to a few people like, hey, you have any interest in this player going on Sunday? And vice versa. If I was down big, I reached out to a few people on Friday, just like, hey, what about X or Y? Because why not try and juice that schedule? Like I said, this is or like we've said many times, in a compressed season, you need to find those types of advantages.
Big brain thinking from Ben. It's like, that's why you're the second place.
Well, Well, I think it helps with you guys having such a close-knit division where you're always communicating with each other and you're getting trades back and forth a lot. Like I had one person offer me in my division being like, hey, Mantha's not been performing. If you're thinking of dropping him, which I was at the time, and I eventually did, you're thinking of dropping him, maybe we can work out a deal, Fab or whatever, some player you want instead of using a pickup. But it got to the point where I didn't have time to do that. Like I needed to make a pickup for like the next day or whatever. And I don't have enough time to send out the offer and wait the day. And who knows, maybe there was some type of counter and then it doesn't end up going through and so forth. So like, to me, the counter mechanic actually kind of worked against the Fab trading because I didn't want to do it because I wasn't sure when the deal would end up going through. But
yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, you have this perfect plan and someone counters and all of a sudden you didn't make the pickup because you made the trade. And like, yeah, very tricky.
The season this year wasn't as long as most seasons, but it still felt long. There's a lot of emotional waves, emotional changes throughout the year. You finish with the draft and you're all pumped up on adrenaline on it. How do you guys deal with the drain of the season? Do you find there are certain specific times of a season that are kind of like doldrums where it's to kind of stay interested? Someone's holding up coffee. Tom's holding up coffee. That's how he stays interested.
I think it was a beer.
Oh, no, not coffee. That was his,
it's a Guinness.
Sorry, that was his beer. How do you guys get through the drain of the season? And when do you find a season draining?
I think usually for me, it's around Christmas, January, like the regular drain for as a fan of hockey, where like, you kind of tune out for a few months after the season gets going. And then you get really excited once the playoffs begin to ramp up. I have a very, very short attention span. And I struggle with that in fantasy in an average year. This year, while it was crazy draining and while I am exhausted and very prepared for this season to be done, I also found like the shorter season made it a bit easier in that regard because it did end much sooner than the average season.
I'd like to, and maybe Dave, you can chime in because I think Dave, you had a similar like starting sort of like bad luck of like losses. It was just like once it got to a stage, I think I was like 1-5, and I was like almost like ready just to like throw in the towel, being like, what do I got left? It was very hard to like mentally get yourself amped up for things because like I was 1-5, basically half of the schedule is already gone. What are my chances to get in and all of that kind of stuff? At that point, I think it was like week 6. I was like, my brain was so turned off that I had to like put in like almost motivation for myself to be like, okay, Tom, put some effort into this because you don't want to like throw the league or anything. But there was times where it was like definitely really rough that way. Just because you don't have time to rebound. I know Ben's saying like it's not as long, but there's like a little bit more variance and forgiveness with a longer schedule as compared to this one, where I felt it was very easy to like the waves is like you have big highs, but you also have real big lows.
Yeah, I know for me, like you said, I'm always very good at recognizing, okay, like I need to turn it on, week 15 to make sure, by like week 20 or whatever it is, I'm in a good spot or whatever. But this year, yeah, it was like the third matchup. I was 1-1 and then I lost and I was like, crap, because I knew the next week I was in a bad spot just because of games played or whatever. And then from there, I'm 1-3. And from there, it's like, better start preparing for the relegation tourney, like at that point. So it was pretty much immediately brutal right away. It never got better.
I think too. Oh, go ahead, Tom.
Was anyone in a losing, like on a under 500 after week 6, then like turned it around? I'd like to know. I haven't looked at those stats, but I'd love to know like who was under 500 and then made it. It seems like
3-3
were up there.
Yeah, Ben was.
I started 1-3, and then I went on the stat attack and won 7 of my last 8 to make the playoffs. Stat attack bump. Thank you, Mark.
I need to find my DMs. I'm pretty sure that Ben, you DM'd me like right after the draft, being like, "I totally messed up that draft. I'm like so upset. Like this is gonna be." And I was like trying to console. You're like, "Your team is so good." Like you're telling me, like pumping me, like, man, I wish I drafted a team like yours." And then meanwhile, like 13, 14 weeks later, you're knocking me out in the semis. It's like,
Brian also was being very nice to me at the time. And then the other day was like, yeah, you definitely had the worst team coming out of the draft. I was like, thanks, Brian. I know.
Just to tie something that Dave and Tom said together quickly, I think that that feeling that you kind of have to win every week in the shortened season was also what contributed, and the addition of the fab trading, I think, is what contributed to that sort of, I'm going to make a move that might win me this week, and then I'll deal with the repercussions later. That's sort of what Ben was talking about, right? If you were in a good spot where you felt like you could win your week and you've got like a Saturday, Sunday guy, that's someone that you can dangle in front of someone for some fab or maybe a lower end player. That could be really interesting. So I wonder if that's going to impact the number of trades that take place next year, because we're not desperately trying to win each week as it comes up. It's not quite the same level of urgency.
Yeah, I actually felt the same as you, Lewis. I think that was my biggest takeaway of like a lesson learned for next year is I think I spiraled a bit at times and like sort of started freaking out and making trades that maybe I shouldn't have, just because I was thinking too short term. When it's like I had a good thing going, I like had some bad luck weeks where I just went up against like really strong teams, and like I think I need to really learn how to stick with the plan, as they say, and not veer. But sometimes you have, like, I don't know, I really got in my head, like, well, look at this, there's only 2 weeks left. And if I lose this, and if this person wins this, I was like, it was technically possible for me to get eliminated if I didn't win like this crucial matchup. And then you start making moves, and then afterwards it's like, wow, I didn't even need to do that. And now my team is shorthanded. I imagine you felt the same, Lewis. And then so maybe we were both a little bit more hobbled going into the playoffs than we would have liked. Meanwhile, Dustin is just cruising the whole time, able to just enjoy the ride, pick up Malkin and Sagan just in case.
That's the advantage, I think, of getting those early dubs and just feeling confident about your team and knowing that maybe you can take a few L's down the stretch and it won't make too much of a difference, especially when it looked promising that I was going to get the bye. I didn't have to worry so much. And I saw Big Ben coming up against me, and I said, who cares if he blows me out by 80 points, right? I still got my bye, and I can start preparing my team for week 13, week 14.
Yeah, plus you don't have the emotional drain that like someone like Tom or like other of us were talking about. Like, when I think losing, like, I know, like John, when you asked the question, you were like, is the long or the shorter season was like more emotionally draining? I think for a lot of us, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I'd imagine it's like losing is draining. Like when you lose a week, it's like, ugh, I'm so like, and whenever I win, it's like so much energy. Like if I win every week, I could do a season forever. I'll never get tired of it. It's fun.
Yeah, the effort is worth it. It's rewarding if you're getting the W's, but if it's not going your way, then it's a lot more difficult to stay motivated. I think the biggest thing for me was just across all of my fantasy competition is just reeling in the number of leagues. I like many of us here, right? I've had years where I've been in 7, 8 or more leagues, all with different formats. So you're targeting different types of players, and you really have to be on every single type of player and category and statistic, and it's draining to be like that. And this year I think maybe I had success because I limited myself to only 3 leagues and 2 of them had relatively similar formats, and so I wasn't constantly making like 30 ads per week, because I'm always going to make every ad that I can, and I can't not do that. So if I can give any bit of advice, I would say try to reel in the number of leagues, especially if you're really motivated going into the draft, but by the end of the season, you're not going to care about the outcome of 50% of those leagues anyway. So why put in the season-long effort?
Words of wisdom and warning from the ultimate champion, Dustin. Congratulations to Dustin. We're so excited for you.
Results pending.
Yeah,
that's right. You never know what'll happen if Robbie Fabry shows up in the next 30 minutes for Ben and gets 5 goals. But
just you wait.
But you guys will have a chance to go up against each other again next year. Elon, do you want to talk to us about what next year's Tier 1 is going to look like?
Yeah, another stacked group. Unfortunately, also for the people who are going up to Tier 2 and even Tier 3, you're also getting a stacked group of the people who are not sticking around in Tier 1 this year, as we've discussed. But yeah, let's just quickly say, so the people that are going to be in Tier 1 next year, we've got, of course, Dustin and Ben, who were the finalists, and then myself and Marcus, and then Lewis and Joe, that's all the teams that made the playoffs in Tier 1. Then we have Jordan, who won the relegation tourney to stick around in Tier 1. And then we've got 7 new competitors coming in. And the first one has already been mentioned on this show. Jeremy Doc Gusev from Ottawa Tier 2 not only won the fast track, but then also got into Tier 1 the old-fashioned way, and he even did it with a win. He only needed to come in second place in Tier 2 to get the old-fashioned promotion into Tier 1, but he's still coming in, so congrats to Jeremy. And then he beat Harrison in Tier 2 Ottawa, so Harrison's also going to be joining us in Tier 1. Then in Tier 2 San Jose, we got Kyle is going to be the ultimate champion, who beat Brian in the quarterfinals, by the way, and then he rode that all the way to the win. And he defeated Brandon Weave, the one who made our logo, and now he's going to be joining us, Brandon, in Tier 1 as well. Then we have the 3 Tier 3 winners, so that's the Tom and Marcus from last year. I guess, and there would have been one more Tier 3 winner. I think that might be Joe, actually, who is now sticking in Tier 1. So those Tier 3 winners are going to be Knifetown Toddlers and Binghamton Tier 3. Obviously, results pending, but it's looking pretty sure. So that's Patrick. Then we've got our good friend and host of the Stat Attack and host of the Tier 1 auction draft, John Newhold, who, as he said, he's destroying a 286-point week. Do you have any more games coming to try to get you close to 300? Or are you? Oh,
yeah, I had a couple of bids in there when I wasn't 100% sure I was going to win, so I just kind of let them go through. So it added 2 more players for today.
Hey,
so I felt kind of bad, like I was piling on, but I mean, I could lose 90-point lead somehow. I'm not quite sure how, but I don't want to be that guy who like doesn't make that final move and like loses somehow.
I really feel like you don't have to feel bad about using your ads, try to maximize points. That's what this game is all about. So congratulations. It'll be really interesting to play with you after discussing with you all year and hearing you talk about all the couple stats. You're the one with the numbers. And then to finish this off, we've got the winner of Frölunda Tier 3, who is Modern Malkin Mika, who I've definitely been in a league with before. I didn't get a chance to check the past things, but Mika, someone who's been around for a while, Mika Matti, I believe. So he will be a fun competitor as well. And yeah, that's it. That rounds out Tier 1 for next year. And now we have all summer to rest and recuperate and be ready. And I'm really excited to see how that's going to go. Dustin, right now, how would you rank your confidence that you're going to first like be a 2-time winner, the first ever 2-time in a row winner, and then have also your confidence of sticking around in Tier 1 one more year after next one?
I have very little confidence about either of those things, but I'll feel a little better when Dave sends me my belt.
Oh, nice. Definitely. We could Keeping Karlsson Productions will foot the bill of any shipping costs if you're actually willing to send that belt over. Just let me know.
No, it's going to be tough, right? Like I said, I felt really fortunate this season, and hopefully my luck continues into next season, but it's going to be a tall ask for sure with the group of guys that are staying and the group of guys that are coming up. If I come 14th again, then at least I can say I was a champ for a year.
Yeah. I mean, I think this, I don't know if you guys agree. Like to me, this is like the hardest league I've ever been in. And I think climbing up in Cupful isn't so easy because it's all these like intense fantasy nerds. So I think, Dustin, you definitely have this like accomplishment that I think you could legitimately say you're the best fantasy player in the world. I'll say it. Like, I think that Cupful Tier 1, I don't know who else could go against you, but I think this is a huge accomplishment, and like, congratulations. One day I hope
that's very nice to say. And if that's true, then it's only because I've been listening to you and Brian for all these years. I've been soaking up the wisdom, and I'm just using it against you now.
You should, well, yeah, as we discussed, you're one of the only ones that doesn't have a podcast here. And so clearly you have some wisdom of your own to share with others. All right. And so, John, I guess, thank you so much for hosting this. Want to take us out?
Thanks for having me. And thanks for everyone who participated in the Cupful this year. If you're listening to this and you're not currently a participant in the Cupful, make sure to sign up. It's just the $5 a month patron during the season. And you see how much fun we have on Discord, how much fun we have making trades and bids with each other and counters. And the draft is fantastic. We're able to enjoy the slow draft this year. And I know you guys didn't get to enjoy the slow draft because you had the auction, but the slow draft was fascinating because there was so much ability to talk with everyone and get to know everyone in the division as we went along. It was great. So the Cupful is a fantastic experience, and it doesn't take long. Thanks to the fast track, it can be even 1 year, and you, a new player, could be in Tier 1.
Man, we definitely appreciate your hype, John. And yeah, definitely everyone come in. And we'll definitely give people lots of notice over the summer to make sure you sign up. You're not going to miss it. As long as you're listening to Keeping Karlsson or following us on Twitter or like paying attention to us in any way, you'll know with plenty of time when you need to sign up and how to get in. So yeah, thanks so much everyone for joining. This has been so fun. Thanks for a great season. And good luck to anyone who still has leagues pending the rest of the actual regular season. I hope you all are very successful.
See ya.